Okay, Tony Mormino, HVAC TV Podcast Edition. Today's a very special podcast. I have the Refrigeration Mentor himself, Trevor Matthews. Trevor, how you doing this morning?
Oh, Tony, so great. Thank you for having me.
Well, I have an important question for you. I'm going to kick it right off. Are you ready?
I love it.
Okay, so HVAC TV is the name of this podcast, but sometimes when I'm online, I see this funny way of writing HVAC. There's like this little R after the C, HVAC-R. Yeah. What is going on with that? That's my funny way of introducing the topic to the audience. Anyway, I think it's funny, but I don't know if anybody else will.
I know, and I see. I travel all around the world and talk with refrigeration people and HVAC people, and it's always that the refrigeration's the little brother or the little sister, of HVAC, because HVAC is just such a dominant industry because there's billions of air conditioning. We're aware refrigeration system, there is also a lot. You know what I mean? There's a fridge in a lot of homes around the world, and food distribution and transport refrigeration and local supermarket and market refrigeration. So there is a lot of refrigeration out there. But we are a smaller, specialized industry.
Yeah, let's delve into. So we've never had a refrigeration podcast before. We typically have a focus on HVAC engineers, designers, contractor, service tech. So I'm really excited about this. I actually was thinking in my head the other day, and I was, Chat GPT's got this great thing while you're driving. You could actually talk to it like you're talking to a person now, which is totally insane. And I said, hey, here's what's going on. So I started getting into the differences between refrigeration and HVAC, right? And the typical response was refrigeration is lower temperature, and you're refrigerating stuff. You're cooling stuff rather than, HVAC, which is regular temperatures to us and people. So let's talk about what refrigeration is in general and where we see it.
For me, refrigeration encompasses all of it. So my training, it's not only about just low temp or medium temp, because in refrigeration systems that I see out there, it could be running low temp cases or boxes, medium temp, high temp, air conditioning and heating all off one system.
Right. So it's funny because refrigeration, we call it the refrigeration cycle in HVAC. So it is the same, right? In terms of that part of it.
Yeah. And so a lot of people, when they start looking at refrigeration, they see it as more complex because it's bigger. And, there's more valves, there's solenoids, there's all these different components versus if you look at a standard air handling unit or makeup air. I worked on all of them. But when you get into the VRF, I have a lot of people coming into my supermarket trainings and different trainings where they're in the VRF world, and I can relate it really closely to the VRF world because it's the same. It's similar. If you have a 4-pipe system, we have hot gas defrost. They use a 4-pipe system or a reverse heat pump. And in refrigeration, we're doing a lot more. Well, in CO2, we're doing a lot more heat pumps now, which we're transitioning from the refrigeration world into more of the heat pump world. So I'm getting the best of both worlds, honestly.
Interesting. So, it's funny you're saying that, and I'm kind of thinking in my head. So VRV, so refrigeration seems like what we would use chilled water system for. Like you have this chiller, it makes cold water, you send it out and it goes to all these different fan coils and all these different coils. In our world, HVAC world, other than VRV and VRF, you have one system, but it's just one coil, right? Like you're making refrigeration. The refrigeration cycle has the compressor, the condenser, the evaporator, and the TXV, and you're not pumping it out to a bunch of different condensers and evaporators, but that's not how it is in refrigeration typically, is it?
Yeah. So that's a really good point, because you just talked about moving water. Well, we do the same thing in supermarket applications where we're doing heat reclaim or water reclaim. So we're heating up water and we're sending water out to different parts of the system, or heating offices off the refrigeration rack. So, or a parallel rack system. So it's there's a lot of similarities because when I talk about it anyway, I talk with people and train people all around the world. They could see many of these options in their field. And if not, as it continues to go in the future, the technology in the refrigeration field, and I see it now, is that we're going to be doing a one system does the whole package of the building. And I'm seeing more and more of that.
one system does the whole building because you're taking an enormous amount of heat out of the building, so you might as well use it for heating if you have that need, right?
Yeah, where we done it for the last 30 years or 40 years or 50 years is just threw it out to the atmosphere. We get all this heat, we build all this heat up, and we just reject it out through the condenser. So now it's as we efficiency standards and we want to use less electricity, we want to get away from natural gas or coal-fired plants, all that stuff, where now we're trying to utilize as much energy as possible in one system or multiple systems, but we're doing all the heating, cooling, freezing, medium temp with one system. And I continue to see more and more it going into that direction.
I love it. I love seeing that. I love the not throwing away the energy to the atmosphere because we do an awful lot of that in HVAC, and VRF does a lot of if you do a 3-pipe system, that does a lot of the heat reclaim. And it's funny, I posted something about data centers this morning on LinkedIn, and someone said, it sure would be nice if we could do something with all this waste heat that we throw out to it, because data centers produce a ton of BTUs, right? So we're taking that heat, throwing it out to the atmosphere. I have seen cases where they take that heat, if they have the data center close to a dense population, and they make a district heating facility out of it. So they take all that water, that heat, they heat water, and they use it to heat the homes and the building. You got to have like the perfect situation of energy costs and location. A lot of these data centers, they're not built, next to a big city. They're built where the land is real cheap. And I was thinking, like, so when I see these big refrigerated warehouses, and I don't know, like grocery stores have big refrigerated warehouses, maybe there's heat reclaim. Do they do anything like that with those, or?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they're starting like the way it was done before. It wasn't always done that way, but now district heat is I continue to see that as part of refrigeration plants, and we'll see more and more of this happening. Right now, I'm working with a lot of different contractors and vendors when I'm doing the trainings, where they're doing more of the pump systems, where they're actually pumping glycol to cool down the product or even freeze the product instead of actually using refrigerant. And you're going to also use that to pump for heating. So there's all these different options out there in the refrigeration world where we do a lot of the HVAC side of the buildings.
Makes sense. Now, when we're talking about refrigeration, is it typically CO2 and ammonia? Like, I think of ammonia a lot when I think of refrigeration, but when I go to a grocery store, they're not pumping ammonia around the building, right?
No. So in say supermarket refrigeration, I think the majority of is 98% around the world, or 95 is HFCs. So
is it? Okay.
R22. So because it was R12, then 502, and then R22, and then 404, and now they have like 448, 449, depending on the regulations around the world, because I train a lot of different people. But if you're here, we have the AIM Act in the US. In Canada, we have another regulation body. In Australia, there's one. In Europe, there's the F-gas. There's different bodies, and there's different rules and regulations. And I was doing a training last night. I was doing a meetup with my community, and one of the guys was from Belize. That's where he was from. And he's like, Trevor, we can't get recovery cylinders here. So if we have an issue, we can't, certain parts of the world, we're like, well, do it right. He's like, Trevor, I want to do it right, but I can't get a cylinder. And then after I fill the cylinder up, there's nowhere for it to go.
Nowhere to take it.
So, you know what I mean? So like,
yeah,
I'm trying to do all this training to make sure we're environmentally friendly. You know what you're doing. You reduce your troubleshooting time. You have a better work life. And but I train people in other parts of the world, and they're just like, I can't get the tools. So it's different dynamics depending on where you're at. So I got a bigger view of refrigeration globally than I used to have.
Yeah. So the two refrigerants you mentioned, I wrote down one of them, 448. Is that one of them?
449.
449. Are those? What is the GWP? Are those fall under the AIM Act or no?
No, they're on their way out. They're around 1300 GWP.
Okay.
So they came in around 2016, I think, to replace 404. And that's that's been almost 10 years now, and most people are just starting to learn about it, or they're like, okay, we did a few retrofits the last few years to that refrigerant, but we're gonna see those ones go soon, and they only go for that long, a decade, So
and those are HFCs.
Yeah,
HFC. So
HFC HFO blend, I think, is the mix. HFC HFO.
That's the mix. So I just read an article where AHRI is suing New York City because they've
I see
say
that.
no more HFCs, and we're like, and I didn't realize, I'm writing this down because I did a video on it. I'm going to post it later, but I didn't realize that supermarkets fell under that too. So I mean, how the heck are you supposed to? No wonder they're getting sued. And the Hardy, the refrigeration distribution, they're part of the lawsuit as well. My take is, this is the Tony Mormino take. Like, the AIM Act is hard enough. Do we have to make things any harder right now? Can we just get through this one thing? But what are you seeing in the industry in terms of regulations, refrigerants, and the challenges there?
I think the biggest one that's pushing is the F-gas regulations in Europe, and a lot of people are
Mm.
following. If it is bad and it's hurting people, in the long term, is hurting humanity and people, like, we got to do something about it,
Mhm.
And I don't know. I've been to a lot of events around the world, and these chemicals, how they can affect people, the water, the air, the ground. So this is why we don't want you to release anything out into that. I mean, it doesn't matter what system you're on. So do your best to reclaim, recover, and get that properly destroyed. Because these are chemicals, and they are affecting our planet. And there's only one planet that we have. There's 8 or 9 billion of us,
Mhm.
and if each one of us can work towards helping it last a little bit longer, at doing our small part in the refrigeration industry, at least.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and I know you see a lot of this online too. Like, whenever we post stuff, there's a lot of different political opinions, which we don't get into all that here.
Yeah.
We're consulting on what we see in the industry, and our personal opinions are our personal opinions. But a lot of the comments I see really scare me in terms of liability for people who don't take this stuff seriously. Like, they're talking about just I just throw in the atmosphere, no one's looking. I'm like, dude, don't do that. You got to be super careful with that. Not only is it bad for the environment, but you can really damage yourself or your company by doing that. So just a service announcement, like, if you're
Yeah.
if you're angry at the man and trying to get back at him, you're only putting yourself at risk, right?
Yeah, and there's rules and regulations, and I
Yeah.
do so many trainings around people with technicians around North America that come in, and I talk to them about the rules and the regulations and the codes. The
Mhm.
ones that I know that are important to, like, commercial refrigeration techs, and a lot of them don't know that. They were like, no one ever told me that. Like,
Mm.
because in the U.S., all you need is the EPA 608, and then you can do refrigeration or HVAC, or you can do whatever. You don't need certificates or apprenticeship programs like here in Canada. I know that's in the EPA 608, but it's something that if you've done it 15 years ago, you're not going to remember
Mhm.
exactly all the codes. And it's not like people are updating people why these are valuable. Even when I was a technician, 'cause I was a technician for almost 10 years in the field, I didn't see the value of the codes at the time. I'm like, okay, these are the rules I have to follow. So I'm just doing it. Why do I have to follow these rules? Well, the biggest one is safety. And that's what we talk about in our training programs a lot. You got to be safe. You want to go home to your family, because we're driving, we're working long hours, we're climbing ladders, we're working with chemicals, so it's so important to
Mm.
really understand those rules and regulations to keep you safe. And sometimes it sucks. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I just want to get home. If I do it this way, I'm going to save 10 minutes and I'll be able to get home. But that's when somebody gets hurt. And that has happened to me before.
Yeah, and that's a great service announcement, if you will. And you and I were talking before, and my son Nate, he's 18, and he's starting as an apprentice for as a service tech with our company. And I'm like, just be careful. Don't touch anything. Don't be like me when I'm on a job with the camera. Like, I'm not a tech, so I'm not around it very often. So I've been burned enough to know to be super careful. But, like, you got to be careful. That's the takeaway there, right? So.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. So let's do this. So we get a lot of engineers. I'm going to do two buckets here. Let's talk to the designers or engineers who may consider going into refrigeration. Then we'll touch on contractors who want to add that to their resume, because there might be folks listening and saying, I've always wanted to get into that for whatever reason, or get into that in addition to my HVAC expertise. So from a design or engineering standpoint, what do you say to that person?
Well, we actually do a design course for engineers to learn how to design CO2 transcritical systems, and so I've been learning more and more about the engineering side. The biggest thing is to really look at the full picture of the approach. You want to get into refrigeration design, look at what is similar and what is different, because designing an HVAC, a piece of equipment, is not much different than designing a refrigeration lower temp system. There are just different components. What we're doing is moving heat. In air conditioning, we're moving heat. In refrigeration, we're moving heat. How do you want to move that? And then understand, work with the people around you, because a lot of designers that come into our courses, some of them are new designers, some of them are experienced designer. But after you finish your engineering degree, there's not a lot of refrigeration. Everyone I talk to is like 10% of thermodynamics or 20% of thermodynamics. Most of it's learning from that company that you're working for, or the senior people around you. But we know today it's less and less. We got those leaders have less and less time to train. The newer people come in, and I see this is a kind of a big struggle, and this is the same as technicians. So for the engineers, there's a lot of information online today. There's AI. I use a lot of AI in my trainings to help teach people. There's YouTube videos where you can go, and sometimes you get down on a rabbit hole. I totally been there before, but we talked about this before. If you can go find 2 or 3 or 4 people that seem like experts in their field and they're saying the same thing, that's usually a good high percentage that is correct. And you can study and learn engineering online today for free. It's just going to take longer than getting into a training program, like some of the training programs that we do. You know what I mean? It just fast track your knowledge. But I would say recommend to start learning there, like going and doing some research, get into ChatGPT, get onto YouTube, and really find that. Because you can go to ChatGPT right now as an engineer. What are our top HVAC engineering channels? And it'll at least spit out go check them out. How do you know what I mean? Do some research. We're in such a great place, Tony, to learn today.
And if HVAC TV is not on that list, write your local GPT chat representative and get us on there. And your course too, Refrigeration Mentor. So you brought up CO2. I was assuming like all supermarkets were CO2 incredibly wrong. So is that more of like an industrial type refrigerant, or where do you see that?
So globally, I think there's maybe 100,000 supermarkets globally that have CO2.
Okay.
Out of the millions that are around the world, so it's a very small percentage. It is growing in Canada. It started back in the mid 2000s, because I do a lot of CO2, right? You'll see a lot of stuff online. I'm talking about CO2. Most of my trainings are HFC. Like I'm trying to train the technicians what they're working on, and then I help guide them if they get into CO2, because it's best if you're already working on it, if you come into one of the Refrigeration Mentor trainings, because you have to go out in the field and actually apply the things that we talk about. And that's my whole goal, because I do all our programs are virtual. So it's really when I have a group of technicians and they're working on, say, our HFC racks, well, they'll go out and they'll actually apply the stuff that they learn, that hands-on portion, because I really believe that if we teach something, we show something, they go do it. And that's the best way. Hear it, see it, touch it. That's the best way to learn. And that's kind of how we move our programs. But CO2 at this point, even in North America, there might be 2,000, maybe 3,000 altogether for supermarket as well as industrial. It could be a little bit higher numbers now, but it's a very small percentage of what is actually out there. But it's growing because of regulations.
Yeah, now I feel like I should have known that.
That's okay.
We were talking about that yesterday. I was a guest on your podcast. Thank you for having me. And we were talking about how sometimes you've been around a while and you think you know a lot, and then you hear something like that, and I ask it, and I'm like, I should have probably known that. But so you use a word trans something with CO2. I hear that all the time. Is there a brief explanation as to what that means?
Yeah. So it's just basically above the critical point of the refrigerant. Okay. So you go into something called a supercritical fluid. That would be the engineering term. And every refrigerant can go up into supercritical, above the critical point. Every refrigerant, 404, 22, 410, they all have a critical point. Our ambient just doesn't get there. So that's why you never see it on the enthalpy diagram or the pH log diagram or the molar diagram, whatever you want to call it. Got it.
So I'm curious, I meant to ask this before we touched on engineers, and we're going to touch on contractors in here in a minute, or service techs, or maybe both in the same segment there. But in terms of how refrigeration systems go to market, so from an engineering standpoint, do they have rep? Does a designer have a rep they can call? Like in our industry, if you're designing an HVAC system, you typically call a rep. You say, here's what I'm thinking. Give me some budgets. Give me some selections on equipment. Is that the same with refrigeration?
Yeah. Yeah, it's similar. There's manufacturers all around North America.
Hmm.
Then you have engineer and design firms, and then you have like the end user. So it can happen either way. The manufacturer could be going out, talking with the end users to show them their product line, or you could have wholesaler distributors like yourselves that supply different rack manufacturers, usually on the smaller parallel rack manufacturers. So there's different ways to do it, but it is similar.
But okay, so then it goes out, it gets on the plans, it goes out to bid, and multiple refrigeration contractors. Now, the folks who install that type of equipment is different than the ones out there installing the HVAC typically. Is that correct? It's a
Yeah.
specialized
So
field.
yeah, so the way it works, I would say in refrigeration, you'll have installers,
Hmm.
you'll have startup commissioning teams, then you have service teams, and then you'll have maintenance or facility teams. So it's similar in the HVAC industry. You know what I mean? You have the
Hmm.
installers, then you have the startup guys. So it's the same. Only we're just working on a little bit different equipment. I have a lot of HVAC people that do commercial refrigeration, say 7 to 10 years. And they're like, I've been doing HVAC, commercial HVAC for a long time. I want to get into refrigeration. And they come into the program and man, they crush it because when you talk in terms of they understand like TX valve, well, they know what a TX valve. So what are we doing? We're just reducing that pressure. Oh, well, we're reducing the pressure more in a refrigeration system versus an HVAC system. That's just one quick example. Compressors are the same. It could be a scroll, could be a
Hmm.
paramedic, and they're doing the same. We're using vapor compression. And so it's, when you can relate it, and I've seen so many people from the commercial HVAC industry get into supermarket or commercial refrigeration, and they crush it because they
Hmm.
want to do awesome at it because they just did a career in HVAC. They spend 7 8 years. Now they get into something that's more. It is a bit more difficult if you're just working on standard units the whole time. But when you can relate it, I just see a light bulb go off all the time, and I'm getting emails and messages like, "Man, this is like game changing." Like I was doing this for a year or two, man, I was struggling, and now just all these little tips and tricks that you gave me is just pays for the course. A lot of times they say,
Huge ROI on that
yeah,
investment,
yeah.
I'm sure. So, do most technicians go from HVAC to refrigeration? Are they making a leap 100%, or are they like, I'm going to add this to my resume? Or typically, you find one or the other.
So it all depends on where you're at. Honestly, there's some places like even where I used to work, like I remember working on an air handler in the day, makeup air, a boiler, and then a rack. All in one.
Mm.
I wasn't no good at all of them at the point. You know what I mean? Like I was okay, I would say, kind of like a jack of all trades.
Right.
Where there are other parts of the North America where that technician just works on rack refrigeration, for an example. They don't work on heat pumps, or they don't work on boilers, or they don't work on VRV, VRF systems, for an example. And I think that's where you get more of the specialty areas. But as we continue to evolve, I think we need more technicians who can work on more equipment. This is what I consistently see, because we're running out of the amount of people that we have. And I see contractors like, I can't send this technician to this call. That they'll, like, I send them, but they struggle through the call, and that's not good for the customer. It's not good for us, and it's not good for them because they stress out. Even the contractors think of that stuff. Like I worry about my technician, if I send them to this call, that they're going to struggle because they just don't have that experience, right? If that makes sense.
100%. And training is such a needed thing right now. We do a lot of training online. You do a lot of training online, and I think it's not just the training, but the bodies, like the deficit of people who are willing to go into the trades. And I'm like a big supporter of the trades, right? Like I talked about my son. I went to college personally, and
Yeah.
it's served me well. But I see folks going to college and getting in way too much debt for the degree that they get, and that if that's your thing, great. But look at the ROI of what you're getting, because you're purchasing a product from them, and it's got to be important when you graduate that you're not mired in debt. So don't, and then consider I always say consider the trades based on what you feel like you would be good at, not what society. Don't listen to society, right? because trades could be if you like that, it could be a great career. There's people who just they don't want to sit at a desk.
Yeah.
They don't want to do the boring stuff like I do sometimes. They want to be out in the field and doing that. And, some people don't do that because of maybe their parents or society. And, give it a try. What do you recommend to the someone who's like green, like 18, 19, and they want to get into refrigeration as the trades? What would you say to that person? What advice?
I would say try it. Get in, have an open mind for sure, because it's not easy. It's definitely not an easy, but no job is easy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, if you put the work in, and this is what I talk about with a lot of my students, like if you put in 7 to 10 years and you plan your path, you can be off the tools and you can go to college pay for the college right up front. And this is the difference for me. When I look back, I went to university, I went to college before I got into the trades.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the trades because I could make more money than my college diplomas. And
yep.
I started off my first year at $3 more an hour than the business job that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I just worked really hard and kept an open mind, because it was not easy. And I worked in my position. I wanted to grow really fast. So I was working nights, I was working days, I was working weekends. I traveled to different provinces across the country to grow. And because I wanted, and I was actually chasing the dollar for that period of time, because I could. Because you can make really good money in our industry, but sometimes you have to move. And this is what I tell, they're like, okay, well, I only get paid $25 an hour here, and I see people getting paid $60 an hour. Okay, well, go move for that $60 an hour. Now you got to pay rent, and you got to pay house and property taxes in a different place that may be way more money, but you're making that higher amount value. So if you do your research and you're willing to move, there's so many companies around North America that will hire someone who's willing to put the work in. But if you're young, it's all about investing in yourself. What can you learn in that year? Create your path, because no one actually is going to create your path for you. If you're 18 or 19, we think, because I remember I've even do that sometimes even when I was older. Okay, if I work with these people, they'll help me get to that place. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it's all up to me. So investing in yourself, find that path. A couple years, I'd say get a few years under your belt after you become certified, and then find out where you want to do. Do you want to get in engineering? Do you want to get into sales? Do you want to get into design? Do you want to own your own business? You can do so much in our industry. It's so amazing. But it's hard. At 17, I didn't know. I just went to university because that's what everybody told me I had to do, or I wouldn't get a job.
Yeah. I'm 54 and still trying to figure it out. So it never ends. And I'm glad you brought up the point of it's hard, because it is hard to be successful at no matter what you do. You got to really work your butt off. And I get calls, and I love to talk to people. We do a lot of stuff online, and you do as well. But I get messages on LinkedIn, and I if I got time, I give them my number. I say, hey, call me between such and such and such and such, and I'll talk to you when I'm driving. And I'm talking to them, and they're like, I've been doing this LinkedIn thing, and it's just not working out. Or I'll pull over and I look at their feed. I'm like, bro, you haven't even started yet. Like, you've got 3 posts in the last month. Like, so the point to that is, like, anything you do in life, you got to really work hard at it if you want to be successful at it. There's no I haven't found an easy path to getting what you want. And you got to go through a lot of learning curves. And, you talk about the kid who's like, I want to make more money. Well, you get paid on your value, right? What are you worth to your company? They're going to pay you by the value you bring, and, getting educated and up in that education and your skills is a good way to do that. Right.
Yeah, there's a good saying that I've took away from a guy named Les Brown. He's like, if you do the easy things, your life will be hard. But if you do the hard things, your life will be easy. And that resonated with me, because it is. If you do the hard things, things will get easier. Like putting the work, coming into our training courses and the training that you do, spending 2 hours a night learning and growing. Before I started my business in 2021, I spent like a year or more just investing, learning, maybe 2 years. And I was talking about 10 years before starting my own business. You know what I mean? It took me almost 10 years to get it. And it was a totally different business. I was thinking of starting a refrigeration contracting business, but I started my business as a commercial refrigeration training business. But I spent hours a night, Monday night, Tuesday night. I'd work all day. Then I would do some work for my current job in the evening. And then I'd work on me for a couple more hours. And I've done that for years and years. And like we talked about yesterday, like making videos, like I got, you can go to my YouTube channel or LinkedIn. I got hundreds and thousands of videos. But you know, the first ones were very difficult. Like that, and I challenge anyone to like I told you, I challenge anyone, do the 90-day video challenge, 3 minutes a day, a video of you talking into the camera. And you know, after the 90th one and you do it every day and you post that, then you'll be like, okay, all
right, I'm not completely humiliated.
One is definitely not as good as number 90.
It's so true, and it takes forever. And it's funny you say that, because I have my son's friend is going to be a YouTube star in his mind, right? I'm gonna get a Lambo. He wants to get a Lamborghini in 5 years. And I said, oh yeah? I said, what time do you get up in the morning? He says, about 10:30. I said, you're never getting that Lambo. I said, you're fighting against guys who are going to work, 20 hours a day. Like, you got to really go get it. And it's just like, I love this. I love how these podcasts usually turn into something like this, which is, this is hard to be successful at anything, and you got to put in the work, but the fruits of it are great,
Yeah.
And
and it's like anything, like we said, if you want to be a doctor, like people, that's what I think here in North America is, a doctor, a lawyer, a dentist, whatever. Do you know how much work they put in to become that? Like, nobody thinks about that. Just you become a doctor. That's like 8 or 10 years of hard work. Can you imagine putting 8 or 10 years in on your business, or 8 or 10 years in on that thing you want to do? If it's a trade, it doesn't matter what it is. It's sales, real estate. It doesn't matter. 10 years of hard work, studying every day, practical study into, you know what I mean? Like doing the interns and stuff. Like, that's why they get that pay. You know what I mean? If you did something else and you worked that hard, you could get that pay, the same pay as well. But that's where the shift is. And I kind of see that now, where I didn't know that at 17 or 18. They put the hours in. It's the reps.
Good stuff. It's the reps. All right, one last point I want to touch on. I've been really keen on this lately, and I want to touch on it and get your kind of take on it and have a little conversation about the importance about what we do in terms of HVAC and refrigeration. Now, this really hit home with me a few months ago. So in September, I'm looking out my window. There's the Pisgah River is right here. And we had a flood. We had like a biblical flood in this area, and you can't see the water line, but it's above where my finger is right here. So this part was completely underwater. All this was gone in my office. And excuse me, the French Broad River. I don't know why I said the Pisgah. That's a different river. But anyway, so we had a flood come through. Well, the town lost power for some areas. Don't have power today because their buildings are gone. Some areas, like here, we were, I think, a month or two before the whole area got up to speed. Well, quickly, when the grocery stores go down and there's no food, that's a big deal, right? Like, you forget how much you rely on the systems that we keep in check. So 2 things I want to touch on right there. If you're watching this, have some canned goods in your pantry, just in case. This isn't a prepper show, but I feel like moved to kind of say that. You don't have to have a lot to survive a couple weeks. Some canned goods, some water, stuff like that. Luckily, my wife's she takes care of all that. So thank goodness we had all that stuff. But, the importance of what we do in the industry. And I'll share one more thing for me. Like, when I go into a lot of what we do is on paper and on the computer, right? Then you walk into that big chiller plant at the local hospital, the local cancer center, and you're like, wow, if this goes down, this is a big deal for some people. Can't believe my first thought is, I can't believe they trusted me to sell this equipment, because it's like, it's bigger when you're there in person. So what my point I'm trying to make is, what we do is important, and we have to treat it as such with the respect it deserves, in terms of making sure we're educated and we're up on the codes. And I'm not perfect at all this stuff either, but it's just a good reminder to me. So what do you say about all that?
Well, for me, like, refrigeration takes care of the planet. We would definitely not advance this fast if it wasn't for refrigeration, hands down. Like, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, and people can say, oh, it's carpentry, or it's electrical. It could be. But at the end of the day, refrigeration does all our medicine, does our food, does our phone, like our communication. Our phones now is because of servers that are staying cool. Data centers, all this what we're talking on right now is because of refrigeration technicians and HVAC technicians. And people don't, like, the public doesn't understand that. And I didn't understand it 20 years ago when I was fell into refrigeration because I was a first gen technician. But I think our planet revolves around refrigeration and HVAC. And one of the things is one of the things that it's the difference between refrigeration and HVAC is, and it can be a problem for the refrigeration field, is that HVAC is comfort, right? So if all of a sudden it's the middle of the summer and your HVAC goes down, you're like, the public is, let's make a phone call. Now, if your fridge goes down and you have an extra fridge, well, we'll get it fixed, or you know what I mean? Like, oh, well, it's working okay, it's not that big a deal, or we'll buy a new one. It's still important. But like what you said earlier there, if we lost all the refrigeration for 5 minutes, just say all the refrigeration stopped in the world, there'd be some mad things happen. You know what I mean? Because it's like all our phones probably would stop, but this would stop. You know, the medicine would stop, the hospitals would stop, like from the chillers, you know what I mean? Like, there would be chaos. and so that's why refrigeration is so important. And we're great at talking. I talk with lots of people around. We're great at talking about it because you're in HVAC, I'm in refrigeration. Internally, we're great. It's really difficult to get this out to the public, like how important refrigeration is, until something drastic happens. Like you need that medicine, for example, or you need that food. And that's when then people see it, but then people forget how important refrigeration is to make the world go around.
Absolutely. Great way to leave it. So before we go, let people know where they can get more training, Trevor, from one of your courses.
Oh, I love it. So yeah, you can head to refrigerationmentor.com. Yeah, that's refrigerationmentor.com, or head to LinkedIn, connect with me, DM me there, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook. You can, wherever at, just come and find me. We do lots of different courses. So we do supermarket courses on HFC refrigerant and commercial refrigeration. We do CO2 courses. We do chiller courses. We do design CO2 courses. So we have a lot of stuff, customer service training. And we build customized training. So we try to just fill the need of those refrigeration technicians and contractors out there, and even a lot of commercial HVAC customers, to just really help grow your knowledge. Level up. You know, I was that technician that really wish I had a lot of my training programs when I was 6-7 years in the industry.
Excellent. Trevor, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate you.
Tony, thank you so much for having me, and thank you, everyone.